Hey, sixth graders, it's the makeup lesson for lesson number 23. Mr. Songere here with you, and we're going to be talking about balance and blend today. And what I need you to do is to do a written recap of this lesson and hand that in to me. When we talk about balance and blend in a band or an ensemble situation, we're talking about listening to how your sound is comparing and contributing to the entire sound of the ensemble. And that entails is as you play to be able to hear what's going on around you and make decisions on what you should be doing. One thing that you should be paying attention to, this is the first concept that you should write down, is dynamics. And are you playing at the level that you should be? Sometimes the entire ensemble is playing softly, sometimes they're all playing loudly, and your dynamics in your music also indicate that, so then you should make sure you're doing that. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're not playing softer than everybody or louder than everybody. You want to make sure you're on that same dynamic level. Now, there's other times where certain instruments might be louder than other instruments because they have the melody, for example. And then if you are one of those people with the melody, then you want to bring that out. If you have a forte or a mezzo forte in your part, bring that out a little bit more. If your part is more of a piano or mezzo piano, then you want to make sure you bring that down and make sure you're doing that. There are just by nature some of you play louder than others, and some of you play instruments that are louder than others. So you need to be aware of that. So you might think, hey, I'm playing really softly right here, when in essence you're still playing too loud, and so you need to be aware of that. And you also need to be aware of your instrument and the ranges. I think, for example, the flute, when the flute gets up into the high range, it gets pretty loud, and when the flute gets down into the low range, it gets really soft. So you have to be aware of that, flute players, and everyone else on your instruments. You have things like that too, where you're like, okay, now when I get into this range, it gets pretty loud. So if I have to play up high on a flute and keep it soft, I'm really going to have to work hard at that. Or the opposite, if I'm playing really low and have to play loud on the flute, I'm really going to have to be aware that I got to really play loud. So that's number one, dynamics. Number two is just the idea of your tone and your sound quality, and making sure that that sound is filling in nicely with the band. Um, Again, if you are, if let's say you're playing a trumpet, and you have a forte and it's really loud, there's a difference between a nice, warm, beautiful, loud sound and a really, just ugly, gross, loud sound that's just ear piercing. So you want to make sure that that sound that you're producing on your instrument fits in with the rest of the band. We usually talk about using warm air, using that kind of fog up the mirror kind of sound, and using a lot of air to make your sound really full and nice sounding, and not that crass, gross sounding sound that a lot of times brass players can get. A lot of times saxophone players, if you just start blowing and not really paying attention, you can get a really loud sound. You can start squeaking on reed instruments. Flutes can get very airy. So you want to make sure you avoid those sounds and get a really nice warm sound and blend that with the rest of the band. And then speaking of air, I think that brings up the third thing, is just having a nice steady airflow when you're playing, to make sure that that tone and those dynamics, the first two things that we talked about, stay steady, and that you don't have pulsations in your sound. You're not standing out and then coming back and not standing out, and it's not a wavering sound. It's just very steady, and that comes from your airflow, keeping the airflow going at a nice steady pace. So those are our three big concepts. I guess if I could just add a fourth in there too, actually if I could add two more, phrasing, making sure that you're breathing at the right points. If the whole band's taking a breath or the whole ensemble's taking a breath, that you take it too and you're aware of that. And then also articulations, tonguing, paying attention to things like accents and slurs, and making sure you're doing all of those together too. Cutoffs would probably fit into that category, making sure you're cutting off together. So those are really important too, articulations and phrasing. So just paying attention to all that stuff is going to help your overall balance and blend as a group. So there you go. Get that written evaluation or recap, I should say, of that 5-minute video and get that to me as soon as you can. Thanks.